Welcome back, friends. Tonight is Oscar night. Another film will join the pantheon of Best Picture winners. Last time we looked at Best Picture winners 1950 through 1954. So today we'll get 1955 through 1959. Please comment some of your favorite Best Picture winners of all time below. And let's jump in with 1955's Best Picture winner. So Angie, what do you feel like doing? I don't know. What do you feel like doing? I don't know. What do you want to do? Oh, we're back to that again. In 1953, writer Paddy Chayefsky wrote a TV play called Marty. It's available here. I believe it was on Goodyear's kind of theatrical anthology show. And this kinescope is available in this wonderful Criterion Collection release of the golden age of television, but that teleplay was all about a lonely, middle-aged man who worked as a butcher in New York City, desperate to find a date. All his siblings have gotten married, most of his friends have gotten married, he's kind of being pressured into it, and, he suddenly, one night, meets a girl. The story, of course, was called Marty, featuring Rod Steiger as the eponymous character, Marty. I like the original teleplay. Rod Steiger's performance is a little weird for me. Of course, Rod Steiger we'll talk about next year for his starring role in The Heat of the Night, which won him an Oscar. But Paddy Chayefsky and others saw the potential of that teleplay to become a feature film. And so we get our winner for 1955, also titled Marty. You can see Ernest Borgnine down there on the bottom. Marty is probably one of the simplest Best Picture winners, only running 90 minutes. That's only about maybe 25 minutes or so longer than, probably a little bit longer than actually, probably close to a half hour longer than this teleplay is, but Marty tells an amazing story. I'm not a big fan of Rod Steiger's performance. He comes off as a little bit psycho sometimes, like he would stalk a woman, that kind of thing. That's not what we want. Ernest Borgnine plays the part with so much more gentleness and so much more believability. Several co-stars reprised their roles from the original teleplay. The actress who plays his mother and his kind of frustrated auntie, they both pop up here. Joe Mantell, later of Chinatown, he's seen as Angie, Marty's best friend, and so on. There are quite a few recognizable character actors in both versions, but Marty works on so many levels. And I think for all those who are frustrated by the dating scene, the relationship scene, watching Marty wouldn't be a bad idea. Today we talk about the frustration young people have. Marty shows that someday love will strike, and you never know when. You never know if it's going to happen or not. I really like that. Ernest Borgnine brings so much charm to the performance. Rod Steiger, again, is kind of that hard edge. Ernest Borgnine doesn't really have it, despite the fact he played villains multiple times, including in another one of my favorite films from 1955, Bad Day at Black Rock. You can see up there where Spencer Tracy beats the crap out of him using martial arts. But here, Marty is your everyman. He loves a good beer and a good joke and to sit at home and watch TV. Yeah, he's lonely, but he doesn't let it get the better of his life, and he's always kind of positive about it, and that kind of thing. And Rod Steiger doesn't really carry that into the original teleplay that well. So Marty still has kind of an ambiguous ending, which I know frustrates some people, but casting, very plain-looking people in a plain, no-frills love story is a really actually an interesting thing about this Best Picture winner, because as we'll see with the other winners of the late 50s, all of which are in color, and most of which would qualify at least some capacity as an epic, here we have a simple, straightforward love story. I think that's why, Marty, which even was interesting enough, screened in the Soviet Union, no less, Marty still remains a classic. It's just a simple love story. Boy meets girl kind of thing, or man meets woman in this case. Highly recommend it. Let's take a look at something now with a little more panache, shall we? Oh, around the world in 80 days with Passepartout. That's something else, never mind. When I was a kid, H.G. Wells was my go-to, but I was also a big fan of Jules Verne. Here's the same Jules Verne book, the big omnibus collection I had when I was a kid. And you might notice the second story on here, Around the World in 80 Days. We've talked about globe-trotting adventures, usually comedies, on this channel before, and films like Alfred Hitchcock's Rich and Strange from the early 1930s, and in this case a follow-up to our discussion for the moment. The black and white, low-budget parody, The Three Stooges Go Around the World in a Daze. We've discussed these and how they don't really fulfill their globe-trotting idea. The budget was just too low, in between stock footage and uninspired sets and some, definite reliance on the viewer's imagination. They managed to get some semblance of an around-the-world comedy, but not really. I say it because today we have the opposite conundrum. Around the World in 80 Days, Best Picture of 1956, had the budget and the star power and the full studio backing it needed to become this big, globe-trotting, full-color, widescreen epic. And it is a strange film. On one hand, there is a novelty to seeing cameos by everybody from Sir John Gielgud to Frank Sinatra and Marlene Dietrich and so on. But Around the World in 80 Days exists mostly to assert that there was nothing that could compare with seeing a full-length epic feature film on the big screen. This was once described on YouTube as the movie that declared war on television, and I absolutely understand that. Whereas Marty adapted a television program and made it into a feature film, Around the World in 80 Days was an attempt to say, hey, do you really want to sit at home, look at this small screen and all was in black and white when you can see a full-color epic with all kinds of gorgeous cinematography from sites all over the world. Indeed, the trailer goes out of its way to build this thing up as a movie unprecedented before, bigger than Gone with the Wind, that sort of thing. Around the World in 80 Days, I think, has its own kind of quirky charm. David Niven, who claimed this was his favorite of all the films he made, is in top form, as of course Phileas Fogg, the ever-proper English gentleman, going around the world with his nice top hat and his cravat on all the time, that kind of thing. He has my favorite line in the whole film. There's to be no further fiddle-faddle, Passepartout, as he says to his servant, played by Cantinflas, the famous comic actor, who exists, of course, to provide comic relief in every different nation, in every different situation. Some of the supporting cast get really good cameos. John Carradine pops up a few times for some comedy, that kind of thing, while others, like Frank Sinatra, get really next to nothing. Frank Sinatra has no lines that I can remember and just kind of exists to play the piano. It's really bizarre. Everybody's kind of falls on a different spectrum. Robert Newton, in what I think was either his final or almost his final film, pops up as Fix, the man trailing Fogg, trying to kind of ruin his Around the World in 80 Days bit, thinking he's a bank robber. His performance is good. You can tell alcoholism has taken its toll on him. The one that should stick out to me and doesn't, Shirley MacLaine. This wasn't her first film, but it was still pretty early. She'd been in movies like Hitchcock's The Trouble with Harry, kind of a quirky dark comedy in the past, but she doesn't really make much of an impact here as a love interest, which is surprising, I think, to say about Shirley MacLaine, who usually has a great presence to her. Here she's just kind of, she's the love interest. She's a princess Fogg saves, and then she follows him around, I should say. I don't know. At the end of the day, if you like Rule Britannia, and you love these kind of, bit-in-time shots of different nations and different cultures and stuff, I think we get a lot out of it. But at the end of the day, Around the World in 80 Days really hasn't aged all that well, I don't think. And it's kind of more on the silly end of the best pictures. I don't know, which is a shame. But I guess adapting the story, the original print story, into a movie does necessitate it as a comedy to some degree. But I don't know. It's not one that I dislike, but it's not one I really latch on to either. Now let's take a look at a much more serious film for 1957. I'm not a very good whistler, so please indulge me. You get the idea. 1957's winner, Bridge on the River Kwai. This was always a favorite movie of my father. He saw it either when it was new in 1957 or in some reissue shortly thereafter. And as a kid, I remember watching it with him for the first time. It is a very impressive war epic. I mean, come on, we have Alec Guinness, William Holden, all kinds of great actors in there. Plus, I do believe our director was the great David Lean. We'll talk about him more when we talk about Lawrence of Arabia in 2027. Bridge on the River Kwai is a lot of the stuff you'd expect from a war epic. It's kind of a personal story, but also a grand story as well. Please forgive the traffic noise. The Japanese are constructing a bridge that will be able to transport, various troops, supplies, things like that by rail over a river. They've assigned prisoners as kind of a work detail to build it. And indeed, when Alec Guinness's very British, very upper class Captain Nicholson is captured, he's in charge of the operation. Or is it Colonel Nicholson? I think it's Colonel. But anyway, he's in charge of the operation and insists the British build the bridge properly and make it a testament to good British engineering. Meanwhile, William Holden, playing an American who escaped the camp, is tasked by British commandos to sneak back to where the bridge site is and blow it up. So we have a conflict of interest, interestingly, on the same side. That kind of thing. There are British people who want the bridge constructed well, and there are British people who want the bridge destroyed. And then the Japanese officer, played by Sesu Hayakawa, who was a huge star in the silent era. This is probably his best remembered role outside of his silent films. He was very good in House of Bamboo, I will say that. But he plays the Japanese commandant who Alec Guinness kind of just bulldozes over and does his own thing, that kind of stuff. And he knows if he doesn't finish the bridge on time, he'll be forced to commit ritual suicide. It's a very strong setup. It does have a few drawbacks. For one, it's a very slow-paced film. It probably could have been somewhat shorter. At 162 minutes, you could probably have cut some of the fat off of there. That kind of thing made it a little bit more concise. But nonetheless, I gotta say, the actors pretty much nail it. Of course, Alec Guinness won his Oscar. There were several other nominations involved. I don't doubt William Holden was cast because he had played a very cynical World War II soldier before in Billy Wilder's very underrated, and a movie that really should be talked about more, his film Stalag 17. And William Holden shines in that film. He won his Oscar for it, of course, playing the very cynical Sefton. Sefton, is loyal to America, but he cooperates with the Germans because for the time being, it kind of suits his own personal needs. And you can definitely tell they looked at that performance and said, William Holden would be perfect for this guy, an American who escaped the camp, and now we're going to kind of force him back there to blow up this bridge and maybe liberate some of the prisoners and all this kind of stuff. And the British High Command, manipulates him. They give his Navy superiors orders that he has to go back. They try to seduce him with kind of this beautiful British officer, this female British officer, and so on. It's a good performance. It does go on a little overlong, but you can tell they cast Holden because they wanted some of that cynicism from this film to come back and pervade this one. Alec Guinness, of course, is amazing in anything. He was the original Obi-Wan Kenobi, but he also has quite a few wonderful films under his belt by this point. So it makes sense to cast him here, and although his performance is maybe a bit too rigid for some, I do think he does a really good job. So Bridge on the River Kwai also has a lot of visual spectacle. Of course, the finale involving a fight that kind of descends into chaos with friendly fire and everything else going on as an attempt to destroy the bridge is very impressive. It's in full color, which takes advantage of kind of the jungle setting. You see a lot of very vibrant and vivid colors, that sort of thing. Again, it could have been a little more concise. It's based on a novel by Pierre Boulez. I've never read the novel, but I feel like that maybe this movie kind of was a little too self-congratulating, Again, maybe a tighter edit would have benefited it some. But at the end of the day, pretty strong one. I think of all the late 1950s Best Picture winners, this one's probably my favorite. It's close between it and Marty, but I think kind of the scale and the epic nature of things really helps it out some. Alright, let's take a look at a full-color musical now. There are some Best Picture winners I don't revisit very often. 1958's Gigi is probably near the top of that list. Gigi was a massive hit back in 1958. It indeed held Oscar records for decades. But it's not a movie that's aged terribly well. I've talked about Leslie Caron when I covered An American in Paris. In that film, which I think was her film debut, she's not amazing, but she really isn't given much to do either. She's overshadowed by Gene Kelly, Oscar Levant, and her co-star. She's a very good dancer, though, so casting her as the de facto female lead with an actual character arc and things to do makes a lot of sense a little bit later in the 50s when she was an established star. And best of all, she's paired with somebody who is closer to her own age, as opposed to Gene Kelly in American in Paris, or even more egregiously, Fred Astaire in Daddy Longlegs, who was much, much older than her, well over 3 decades. So here she's paired up with Louis Jourdan, and the picture of the two of them together on the package is a very common sort of publicity still image used to promote the film. Louis Jourdan, remembered today for his role in Hitchcock's The Paradine Case and the villainous Kamal Khan in the Bond film Octopussy. He's okay here in Gigi as kind of the juvenile romantic lead, but nothing really to write home about. They could have replaced him with many other French or French-American character actors. It would have worked just as well. Like An American in Paris and a lot of other color musicals at the time, Gigi looks beautiful. And I don't doubt, again, it was made very opulent to make sure that people would want to go see it in the theater instead of staying at home and watching black and white images on their TV sets. But that being said, the plot of Gigi is kind of bizarre. This young girl, it's time she grows up and becomes a woman and considers marriage and so on. So she's trained in the ways of the French courtesan, where she learns how to pick a good cigar and how to dance with a man and things like that. And ideas like, oh, having a suicide attempt is very romantic. And maybe in turn of the century France it was, but I don't think that element of the story has aged really all that well. There is a very good reason to watch, though, and that is Maurice Chevalier, who absolutely walks away with the movie every single scene. He has very good chemistry with all of his co-stars, especially Hermione Gingold. Indeed, their kind of duet number, I Remember It Well, where they try to recall the first date they had and they remember completely different things, that kind of stuff, is the highlight of the movie for me. And I would absolutely recommend the film just on that basis. Maurice Chevalier also gets a chance to sing the most famous song from the film, one that has probably not aged particularly well, Thank Heaven for Little Girls. And while I'm sure his delivery was meant to seem sort of paternal and, loving from like an adult, looking at a child and seeing, the future this child has, it doesn't age especially well and comes off as pretty uncomfortable there. Not a big fan. Gigi just, although it has a good cast, it has, again, the opulence and the beauty, it just feels dated. I mean, granted, it does take place, 50 years before the movie was made, but it just feels like the kind of old musical that people would watch because they enjoy musicals, not really because it's a great film. Vincent Minnelli's direction is good. He definitely had a vision. He'd done enough musicals by this point. He probably knew exactly what he wanted. But, again, it doesn't really work for me. I can enjoy it if I watch it, but it's never really one that I go to seek out. So let's try something a little bit different now. Let's look at a biblical epic. We've used the term epic or full-color epic multiple times throughout this video, but now we come to perhaps one of the reasons why that term even exists. In 1959, the biggest movie of the year in more ways than one was none other than Ben-Hur, based on the great novel by General Lew Wallace himself, who admitted later on, and that interview is included in this copy of the book, that he was very surprised that the novel caught on so much and kind of reshaped, religious/historical texts throughout the years. But there you go. I actually have, from the 50s, these sort of tie-in publicity book, promotional book, and so on. The story of Ben-Hur, of course, is the story of Judah Ben-Hur, a prince made a galley slave who then promptly rises up and befriends Christ, well, sort of anyway. Christ gives him a drink of water when he's a captive, and he gives Christ a drink of water shortly before his crucifixion. But nonetheless, becomes a very prominent player in ancient Judea. And of course the movie's probably best remembered for its epic chariot race. See that giant image here. Ben-Hur had been filmed multiple times before. There was a short version in the 1900s, and there was an epic version from 1925. Actually, my favorite version of the story, because I love Ramon Navarro, and he does a really good job in the silent version. But yeah, Ben-Hur kind of speaks for itself. It's a movie that I don't revisit often, but I'm always impressed by when I do. An amazing cast. Of course, Charlton Heston, probably one of his best acting roles, leads as Prince Judah Ben-Hur himself. We have Stephen Boyd popping up there as Masala. Jack Hawkins is in it. All sorts of other actors. In fact, I do believe There is a page in this book that showcases all of the characters and actors. Hugh Griffith won his Best Supporting Actor Oscar for his role as the Sheik. Really impressive stuff. Yeah, it is probably a little long and by today's standards a little too self-indulgent, but I really think at the end of the day, Ben-Hur remains one of those kind of old Hollywood treats. Much like with Gone with the Wind, it's something that's just so glamorous and so splendid, you can't help but enjoy it. And if you don't enjoy the movie as a whole, you'll certainly enjoy that epic chariot race scene, which is really pretty impressive, even by today's standards. The 1920s version of it is impressive too. Great cast, big movie. So, of course, the book, as you can see, it's pretty thick as well, but definitely was an interesting read. So that concludes the 1950s. So next year, in 2027, we'll go over the winners of the 1960s. So please comment your favorite 1960s winners below, or your favorite Best Picture winners of all time. Hope to see you then. So long, everybody.